There's been something that's been really bugging me ever since this latest generation of GPUs has come out. It started bugging me a little bit before because of the advancement of frame generation, and in this generation in particular, there's a lot of marketing bullshit that's happening that's making me really, really, really upset about how people are now interpreting the future of gaming. And I want people to understand that you don't have to take this crap, but also I would like to clarify what I mean by, well, what is this crap? Why should I be upset about the fact that I'm getting fake frames, I'm getting generated frames, I'm getting not real performances from my GPU? What does any of this mean? Why do I care? Number go bigger, therefore better, right? Well, yeah, but unless you're talking about NVIDIA's bottom line, in which case, yeah, number go up. Oh, that's the real reason why I'm upset. Oh, okay, it makes sense now, right? You might want to crack a drink for this one. So this whole thing started with the RTX 5th generation hype cycle, I guess is the word that I really want to use. I don't want to use that because I think that legitimizes it just a little too much, but it is also factually explaining what is happening. It is the hype cycle of, please buy our product. We don't know how to make this quarter work without you buying our product blindly. Therefore, we're going to lie to you about how things works. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself there. NVIDIA really started this whole generation on the wrong foot, in my opinion, because they started off by saying how their upcoming product, the 5070, would perform exactly the same as the 4090, but for like 1/4 of the price. And while that looks really, really, really cool on a slide on a stage, it also, more importantly, makes the number go big. It's kind of bullshit in terms of like actual, like what you as the person who's going to buy this GPU is going to take home and what they're actually going to experience when they get the card actually inserted in their system and they start playing their favorite games. You are not going to pay $550. End of sentence. You're also not going to pay whatever dollar amount they're telling you and then also get this performance. Both of those statements are just, it's baffling to me that NVIDIA got away, like both in terms of people who buy this hardware looking at this and being like, yeah, I'm okay with this, and also just in terms of like how they were not sued over how inaccurate and how misleading and how genuinely insulting this presentation is. Allegedly, he says, trying not to have Daddy Jensen sue his ass into non-existence. Please, I'm sorry. But you suck. There's been a lot of deep dives into how the actual frames look and how they perform and how all the rendering and everything happens. This conversation isn't about that. It's technically, on a technical level, on a actual talking about the technology level, super interesting technology. Do not misunderstand me. This is like actually kind of really interesting. My problem with it is that they're taking this and going, you can have a Titan RTX 4X XXL and get 4 million frames a second, and it will suck your cock while it's at it, and it will only cost like $600, and it's the same price that James paid for his 670 Ti way back in the day, and yet it's just like the best thing you've ever seen, and like you should just buy it, like just buy more of them, like just keep buying more. Like we've seen a lot of problems with this. This is going to sound really great, I'm really sure. We saw a lot of issues with this kind of thing with Unreal 5 when it came out, where it was like, oh my god, look at all the lighting. Nobody's going to have to bake lighting anymore. And then like you fast forward to 2025 where a bunch of games are coming out, and then everyone's like, oh, maybe there was a reason that we were baking lighting into games. My personal issue with this, it's incredibly difficult to benchmark this kind of performance. Some people have figured out some kind of vague performance metrics that you can use to calculate the actual raw throughput that you're getting from frame generation. Realistically, frame generation makes the picture look smoother, but it doesn't actually generate more frames, which I think is inherently misunderstanding the reason why people generate more frames in the first place. So why do we generate more frames in the first place? It's for smooth, right? It's for better number, right? It's for... No, there's actually legitimate reasons why you might want to render something at 30 FPS rather than 24 FPS. There's legitimate reasons why you might want to render something at 12 versus 24. The specific art form of what you're doing does lend a bit to this, but also the general rule is the number of frames that you're generating typically means that things get done faster. So I'm about to get very, very, very technical and very nerdy about how all this stuff works, and I apologize in advance because also I'm going to be simplifying a lot of things. I am trying to just get through this as quickly as I can. I'm going to simplify so much. The basic idea is that you have your CPU and you have your GPU, right? The CPU and the GPU are rendering different things. The CPU does more logic side of things. The GPU does more graphical math side of things. GPUs are really good at rendering triangles. They're really good at representing shader math, lighting, shadows, that kind of stuff. CPUs are typically better at processing AI or figuring out like the actual programming logic for how the game rules work and that kind of stuff. They have to work in lockstep in order to actually render a frame. Our frame budget is 16.6 milliseconds in order to render a frame to a display. If you want to show 60 frames a second on a 60 hertz display, you have to display one frame 1/60th of a second. Math, right? So in terms of your millisecond budget, you have to choose what different effects you want to do, how many triangles you want to render, and however long those different individual calls take affect your render budget in terms of milliseconds. The general idea is now, in addition to the CPU and the GPU where they're passing information back and forth and they're rendering things accordingly, you now have a piece of code that can go to your GPU or go to the CPU and can hook into both and go, hey, by the way, game, can you give me XYZ detail? Can you give me how fast I'm moving? Can you tell me what the heads-up display is? And can you tell me this other information? GPU, show me what you did last, and I'm going to do some math, and I'm just going to fake what I think the next thing is that should be shown in your render pipeline. And what that does is that creates a more smooth image because you are able to show something more rapidly than 1/60th or 1/30th or 1/15th, whatever your frame budget is. You can show something in that time frame or even double that time frame that you would have been able to otherwise, but isn't actually the game itself running. It's fake. The details aren't real. If I show you a frame in between that's injected with this video right here, yeah, it might look more smooth, but it's not actually a movement that I, the physical human, did. So what does that mean in terms of video game design? Well, as we already discussed, you have to do everything in a specific millisecond amount of time. You have a very specific budget if you want to hit these frame rate targets. You have to make sure that your game logic, your lighting, your triangle rendering, your shader compilations, your whatever, all of the logic and all of the everything is done in this time budget. Otherwise, you are dropping frames. You are not able to render that number of frames in that window, and therefore your frame rate goes down. So a lot of people are looking at frame gen as a way to just bring the number up, which is a good thing, right? Well, if all you care about is smooth, yeah, sure, whatever. It makes it look smoother. But there's a number of issues with frame gen. The whole point behind why frame gen is so derived in the community is because frame gen is generating frames. They are fake by nature. The frame gen that it creates does not communicate back to the game. The game logic does not account what the frame gen did. You still have to update your game logic once every so many ticks. A lot of games will actually lock this rate, so it's 1 out of every 30 frames, or it's 1 out of every 60 frames, and it doesn't ever go beyond that. And all of the graphics rendering that you're seeing in terms of animations or whatever can run as fast as they want to, but the game logic itself, in terms of how fast the AI reacts, how fast projectiles fly, how fast like lighting's calculated, whatever, all that stuff is all based around the 1 out of 60 tick rate of the game engine. Generating a frame doesn't make that go faster. Source is actually a good example for this because the Source engine, whenever it renders a frame, every single time it renders a frame, no matter what your frame budget is, if you are rendering at a frame rate, it is pulling your input. So if you're rendering a game at 300 frames a second, the game renders your inputs faster. It will pull what your mouse and keyboard are doing every 300 like every frame that you're doing in that 300 frame window, which is going to be like, I don't even know what the math is on that. Is that like 4 milliseconds? I have no idea. Like that's an insanely quick time to then take and process and output what the change is. It's ludicrous, but the engine can do that. But if you're using FrameGen to get to 300 FPS, assuming that you have a 150 FPS base input, all of a sudden, it's half that. It looks visually as smooth as 300, but you're not getting the benefit of actually rendering at 300. The game is not actually running at 300 FPS. It is not actually running at whatever that millisecond budget is. So what this means is that if you are actually trying to play a game, you see something happen, but it takes twice as long to update. Well, that's latency, right? Something takes twice as long to happen. It's lag. If it was choppy, that's a different kind of lag. That's graphics lag, but this is input lag. Like imagine trying to play Guitar Hero on like an old, not even like an old TV, like a modern TV, and you hit the button and it doesn't line up with what you're seeing. That's literally what you're doing with FrameGen. You still hit the button and it still takes 1 out of 30 seconds to process that frame. That takes 1 out of 30 seconds to take what you actually did, feed it back into the game. Then the game has to think about what you did and then logic that out and then output it back on the screen. Think about how much fun it would be to play a fighting game over Discord game streaming. That would be terrible, right? Like that would not be fun to play. But that's what you're doing with FrameGen. It's just faster. It's more immediate. It's more in your face. And here's the dirty little secret that NVIDIA has been banking this whole thing on. Most gamers don't actually notice. They don't. Most gamers don't actually care about performance. They really don't. Most people will notice when it's really bad or it looks really bad. Like fucking Scarlet and Violet sold 20 million copies. And that game looks and runs like ass. And people don't care. So if it doubles the smoothness to where people go, oh, it's smooth now, and then they just go back to not caring, but just appreciate that it's smooth now, that's a net win. That's a net win for that consumer, and that's a net win for NVIDIA, who makes the GPU hardware, right? Like that's, quote unquote, everybody wins in that situation. It becomes a problem with people who are typically the people who would watch these kind of videos that I make, because we are the enthusiasts. We talk about Linux a lot, right? Like we are not the average consumer. Like people talk about the year of the Linux desktop, and like whenever it hits 3%, everybody shits themselves. Like we are a percent of a percent. And if you're watching this, then you are typically speaking the person who is a lot more likely to notice these kind of latency figures and figure it out. But even among a lot of my Linux users that I know IRL and also via the internet, people don't notice this shit either. like I got into an actual real heated argument with my last boss at my last job because he was talking about how much less latency the controller input has for the PS5 Pro DualSense, whatever. It's like, oh, it's like 5 milliseconds input delay via USB compared to the previous one that's like 9 milliseconds. And I'm like, the game takes like 60 to render. So like you're talking about improving half a frame of latency when the game itself has like 5 frames of latency built into it. Like what you're telling me tells me that you actually don't know what you're talking about, and you are gaslighting yourself into thinking this is important. And now we're seeing this in the opposite direction, but on a commercial scale. People are now putting out games that run frame generation on console or on the Steam Deck. Monster Hunter Wilds is a great example of this, where it was a game that was designed to only be able to put out 60 FPS if you have frame gen turned on. Granted, texture detail is greater, sure, whatever. Lighting detail is much more interesting. The character rendering, like we can sit here and talk about the differences in rendering, but if I'm looking at a screenshot of left and right, I'm baffled that this is a debate that people are having. And we haven't even talked about upscaling, which I'm also abhorrently against. and I'm forced to use it because that's the world that we're around. The world that we are in right now is designed around upscaling our graphics, even though it is destroying the quality, the visual quality that artists are putting literal years of their life into obtaining. And they have to do it because, I don't know, like poor decisions are being made by management to push 5.89 trillion polygons per second on screen. And in order to do that, you just physically can't do that at certain levels. So instead, what they do is they just go, whatever, just upscale it. It's fine. Nobody will notice. Well, whatever. Fuck you. I notice. And also, fuck you, NVIDIA, for selling a card deliberately, misleadingly using 4 times frame gen. So not only are they rendering 1 frame, we've only been talking about 1 frame, but 4 times frame gen. They are rendering multiple frames for every 1 frame of real, actual game frame that is rendered. And they're using that to claim that their $549 graphics card, which, by the way, does not exist. You cannot buy the 5070 at $549. Even if you were to fucking go in the back of Computex and blow Jensen himself, he will not sell you a card at $549. And everyone's just kind of fine with it. I want to show you guys this article, and then I will leave this conversation for another day. So this is an article that I read the other day that just completely really baffled me, and I'm not sure if it is the person was just really grateful to get a free GPU because they personally got one, or if it was because their boss was like, no, NVIDIA is giving us a GPU, you have to be polite, or what the deal is here. But this article is a fucking shit show, and I really just want to talk about this. The TLDR about it is that this person has... this isn't even actually an image of their... Let's move past that. But he says, Grandpa build. My PC has an AMD Ryzen 7 5800X processor, 32 gigs of RAM. And he said previously he had a 3080 as his graphics card. And then he just assumed it would work on his 5080. So right away, the first bit of this article that is supposedly him upgrading a dinosaur rig 5800X, which, by the way, I have a 5900X and I'm playing Doom TDA at 90 frames a second. So calling it a dinosaur rig is kind of disingenuous. But also, he's got a 3080 and he's upgrading to a 5080. Who would do that if NVIDIA isn't giving you a card? My favorite part is how many times he said the word assumed. So I falsely assumed. I assumed this was not going to work, but I didn't want to work more than this. When I turned my PC on, the LEDs did not show signs of life. Ugh. So I put 0 effort, 0 research, 0 anything into this free GPU that NVIDIA is making me market. And... I'm going to ignore the next paragraph, which is him talking about how he had to DoorDash power cables because, as he previously stated, he put literally 0 effort into this article. So then he's seeing VGA warning lights. It took another hour before I figured out what's going on. X570 chipset on his motherboard is chunky. 5080 is also pretty chunky. And it wasn't fully seating into the PCIe 16X slot. And he couldn't just fucking manhandle it. He couldn't shove it in there physically hard enough in order for it to work. And it immediately goes into a sales pitch for DLSS 4. Super sampling technology that can increase performance and sharpen image quality. What's unique to the RTX 50 cards, however, is multi-frame generation. Notice how all 3 letters are capitalized because you have to make sure that you hit your ad read details correctly, or else the sponsor won't pay you. Here's a fun thing. So he says, however, at 4K with the Ultra preset and RT high settings, my PC could not break 60 FPS, stopped at 51 with DLSS disabled. So he's got a 5080 shoved into his 8X slot, which is not the main slot, whatever, but it doesn't actually matter. It really actually doesn't matter. Let's ignore that. Let's just talk about this. So he's rendering at native 4K and is complaining that he's only getting 51 FPS with the DLSS disabled because games nowadays are designed around the idea that you will just upscale it after the fact, right? Like I was just complaining about. So this is a modern GPU unable to play a modern game at 4K, which is a resolution that PC gamers were able to play Xbox One and PS4 launch titles at when the base consoles could barely handle 900p, 600p, Like, what the fuck? When I flipped the switch to DLAA native resolution and enabled regular frame generation, it jumped to 74 FPS. 51 FPS, switched it to DLAA, but then he enabled 2x frame gen and barely got 23 additional frames. Now, I'm pretty sure that's less than half of the frame rate that he was getting before. So how was that 2x? But if you want more, flipping to ultra performance, the lowest setting you can set it to, got him 124 FPS. So hang on. So the way that the scaler actually works there is that it will take your native resolution, and then the different presets are basically just percentage scales, right? So ultra performance is the lowest possible setting it could be. And according to the official DLSS Wikipedia page, which should be pretty accurate. So Dude was using DLAA, which is native resolution, and then they do anti-aliasing, machine learning, whatever. So that's 3,840 pixels by 2,160 pixels, 60 times a second. That was the goal, right? That's a lot of pixels. But ultra performance mode is 33.3% of the scale, which means that if you're rendering at 4K and you turn on ultra performance mode, you are actually playing the game at 720p. And Dude was barely able to hit 120 frames a second. How can anybody look at these numbers or even physically look at the screen of what they're doing and not go, wow, this looks like shit? Are people so fascinated on bigger number is better that this is the performance that we've accepted? I say fuck that. Let's everybody stop using scalars. This is bad. It makes games genuinely look terrible. There's a reason that I use XESS as opposed to any other scalar out there, because typically TAA runs bad, and also because it runs so bad, it then has to scale down further so you get more reduced resolution. FSR 1 to 3 also just looks terrible. DLSS is also in this category as well. They all look fucking terrible, and they all exist in order to make the purchase that you are spending, which NVIDIA, by the way, has doubled the cost, if not tripled, if not quadrupled the cost of their competitive GPUs. They're using these numbers in order to boost their marketing. They're using this number to make you feel better about the product that you purchased that is actually shit and is not giving you performance improvements that you should be getting, that according to in the past, like all of the stuff, the money that you're spending, you should be getting more, and you're not. And the software exists as part of the reason for why, because they're able to use things like this where they're able to say 5070 has all the same performance as the 4090, but for 1/4 the cost, except that it doesn't, because the frames are fake and also they look like poop. And the game runs bad, and your input latency is high, and also the games don't actually support 4x frame gen, and you're spending $2,000 on graphics cards these days. One of my favorite GPUs that I ever bought was my 8600 GT. Back in the day, I bought it used off eBay for like $45, and it let me go from playing Call of Duty 4 on my integrated NVIDIA 6150 SE. I didn't even have the LE, I had the SE. I was playing 640 by 480, 30 FPS with like a custom config that brought everything as low as it possibly could. And I mostly held 30 FPS most of the time. And then I got the GPU, and then I could play at 1024 by 768, and I could see shadows for the first time. And that was fucking magical. And then fast forward a few hardware upgrades, and I had a 660 Ti. This is probably my third or fourth GPU at this point. And I was playing Far Cry 3, which I actually, if that channel still exists, I'm going to dive into the YouTube's old records. This video probably looks like crap, but this is a video of that game running on that GPU. And like, that's crazy. Like that's a massive technological scale difference between a few years, especially considering the money amount that I spent. Fast forward to now, I have a 6900 XT, and I'm barely able to play Doom TDA. Let's see. So I'm playing 4K, and I'm also playing at quality setting on XESS. So what resolution does that equate to? So according to the scale here, that's 1.70, so 58.8%. Which, if I had to do some math real quick, what would that be? Like 1200p? Is that how that math works out? Okay, so I guess it depends on which version of XeSS is being used. This is for version 1.3, which according to these numbers means that if I'm using quality, I'm actually getting 1270p, which is worse than 1440p, but honestly looks significantly better. I guess it also probably depends on the game, right? Anyway, my point being is that the GPUs that I've been talking about here were GPUs that retailed for 1/5, 1/6, 1/8 of the price as they do nowadays. I bought a GeForce 1080 not that long ago. I'm going to show that video here too. Me putting it in, I paid $600 for that thing, which was a lot of money. That was the most money I'd ever paid on a GPU by double at that point in my career. And I was able to 1080p. Most games were completely maxed, and I was getting crazy frame rates. And it was like mind-blowing how good the performance was of it. It was a miracle. It just didn't make sense that I could have this much power. And then the next generation, the 2080, introduced RT, and then the raster performance was like 10% better, 15% better, 20% better for like double the price. Y'all, we're getting ripped off. I think we're at a point where we, as consumers, need to sit down and say, hey, we're not getting what we're paying for anymore. We haven't been for many, many, many years. And as they introduce more and more and more techniques to be like, oh, no, hang on. It's fine. You can just like, whatever. You can just like do this thing and then magically the number is bigger. At what cost? At what point do we finally sit down and go, no, you're ripping me off. Stop doing this. At what point do we as consumers realize that we're being taken advantage of? At what point do we sit down and we go, you know what? No, I'm not okay with these pixels. These pixels I am rendering in 2025 are not as good as the pixels I was rendering 5 years ago, 10 years ago. At what point do we realize, hey, NVIDIA, you not allowing reviewers copies of the driver for the 5060 so that way you can try to convince people, because the 3060 and the 4060 have been the best-selling GPUs in forever, that they can just go out and buy another one. But then they buy one, and without realizing it, they realize that they bought a worse GPU because you deliberately did not allow people to test it and give people informed opinions in advance. Like, the fact that we even have to have the conversation about that happening and people not rioting in the streets is crazy to me. NVIDIA is literally doing everything they can to hide how bad some of their modern GPUs perform against the last generation, and their pricing for all of these GPUs has been astronomically increasing. And nobody really seems to care. There's a few voices here or there. There's been a lot of media outcry because of it. But as far as consumers are concerned, we just keep buying that shit. We just keep saying, yum, yum, Daddy Jensen, give me more. Fuck me harder, Daddy. And I'm really getting tired of it. I almost bought a 9070 XT. I would have bought a 9070 XT if I was able to afford it when it launched. But I look at it now, and it's now selling for double what it came out at. I bought my 6900 XT for way too much money, like absolutely too much money for the performance gain that I got out of it. And I'm already looking for a new GPU upgrade because I'm not happy with its performance because of everybody being reliant on this scaling nonsense. And I was really tempted by the 9070 XT because of how much of a performance improvement it was. But then I hear that it's going for $850 fucking dollars at retail, which, granted, it's still significantly cheaper than what I paid for my 6900 XT. But it's still double what the card is worth. It's 66% more than what the card is worth. It's like, insert whatever number you want. It doesn't matter. This shit's ridiculous. Thank you for listening to Old Man Yell at Cloud. Fucking do something about it. You as consumers, actually put your money where your mouth is. Don't upgrade for a generation. Especially don't upgrade to NVIDIA. I'm not advocating upgrading to either Battle Mage or the 9070 XT RDNA 4. They all suck. Just don't do it. Don't buy a PS5 Pro that costs more than like a fucking car payment by double. And that's if you have a nice car, which is probably double the car payment that I have. Why? Don't do it. Don't give into it. Don't give them the reason to keep making this shit go higher. And especially with the political landscape that we're in right now with all these tariffs, we have to draw a line somewhere. And I posit that just like with Windows 11, we draw the line here. Do not let these companies keep selling you the same crap that they've been selling you and making you think it's better. Take a stand. Respect yourself. Respect your wallet and respect your hobby. I don't know what word to put here, but you're worth more than this. Don't just sit there and suck it down because that's what the companies are giving you. If you have to go without a new shiny thing, then fucking go without. Especially if they're going to keep giving you this crap. Where it's worse than the last one. Where it's actually worse. It's actually worse. It's actually worse. Don't buy it. I'm going to go before I keep just turning this into old man yelling at clouds like it's been for the last little bit. But this one's a rant, and I'm really sorry, but this is like genuinely making me mad. And the 5060 was, I think, the straw that broke the camel's back for me. So like, fucking don't buy this card. Don't buy any GPUs. Don't buy any CPUs. Don't buy the Switch 2. It's overpriced. Don't buy the PS5 Pro. Don't buy the PS5. Don't buy the Xbox after this price hikes. Don't buy $90 games. Like just don't buy them. That's the only advice I can give you as somebody who loves games, as somebody who has a massive Steam library and just loves to collect games and just plays all kinds of games in all kinds of form factors. For me to tell you to not buy them, like I don't know what else to tell you. If that's where I'm at, then like, fuck, the average person doesn't stand a chance. I don't know. I wish I had more faith for the future, but I don't. Let's give this GPU cycle a go. Let's see how bad things go, because it's going to crash and things are going to go bad. And let's see how things recover in 2 or 3 years. Maybe then I'll buy a GPU. I don't know. I'm going to do everything I can to keep my 6900 XT running where it can. If I have to downgrade my monitors to not be 4K and I have to start playing at 1080p everything, 1080p 60 for everything, then whatever, I'll do it, I guess. But that's a better alternative than giving in to this nonsense. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. This was a real rant, and I apologize for that, but I think it needed to be said. If not for anyone's benefit but my own, I think it needed to be said. I'll see you guys around, and I guess we'll talk more about more things that piss me off in the future.